Hey tea heads, this is Don and Halter from Mayleaf. Welcome to Foundations of Tea, episode number 5. Supposedly the final episode. We'll see how things go.
There's a lot more to learn, to be honest, but we'll see.
So in this episode, we are going to be talking about a subject which a lot of people ask me about and a lot of people feel a lot of fear over. And you were saying before we started that this is the one that worries you the most. And we are going to be talking about how you come up with tasting notes for tea.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people ask me that question because obviously I have to do that every time I shoot a video. And a lot of people struggle with it. And so we're going to try to talk through some tips.
Okay.
But I'm not here to say this is how you do it, but these are my tips. Okay. But before we get involved in that, I think it's important to say that you don't need to write tasting notes. It's not a necessity. You can enjoy tea and be present and mindful with your tea and just observe it. You don't have to necessarily come up with tasting notes.
Okay.
So
when would you? Just, I guess.
Listen, I actually enjoy the process because I find that it focuses me. It focuses me to the moment. I'm forced to sort of engage different parts of my brain, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And it means that I build up a personal relationship with the tea. But if you don't feel that you need to do that to build a personal relationship with the tea, and if you don't feel you need to do that to bring a sense of presence and mindfulness, then that's fair enough.
Okay.
No problem at all. I also think that when you're in a group, it's sort of an interesting thing because in a group dynamic, it can be sometimes intimidating to come up with tasting notes. But at the same time, it can be a very engaging and bonding thing to do because you will inevitably start talking about memories.
Yes. And I think we've done that with you and Celine as well.
Absolutely.
It's been really, really good.
Yeah, exactly. So whilst you don't need to do it, I think it's worth at least people out there trying and using it when you feel you want to. Okay, so we're going to be tasting today this Honey Duchess Oolong, Gui Fei Oolong. Before we start getting involved in it, though, I think it's important that we start to break out some or describe some definitions. Okay, so that people are clear as to what we're actually trying to do.
Okay.
So it's important to first say that I'm not going to be talking about other things to observe or experience in tea, like texture, like body sensation, like the visual side of tea. We're not going to be talking about that. We're just going to be focusing on taste, flavor notes.
Fine.
Okay, and flavor can be split into 2 parts. The first part, and predominantly the most amount of information that you're going to get, is aroma.
Oh, okay. Wow. More than the taste.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Aroma is much more detailed and much more nuanced, and you can pick up so many different types of aromatics. Okay.
I understand that now because when I hadn't seen my family for 7 years, when I went back, there's a particular family member and the smell, like I said hi to him and he had a very specific smell that just brought back like childhood memories.
Well, smell is the sense which is closely linked to memory. And we'll find out a little bit more about that when we get into it. But that's the point. Aromatics have so much detail in it that there can be certain characteristics that just belong to one person, or just belong to one area, and that will trigger memories that are amazing. Yeah. So aroma is sounds obvious, but let's go through it, is taking in volatiles, compounds which basically hit sensors like a postage size stamp in your nose, and all of that information gets taken in, and basically you've got lots of different compounds, they're all taken in, and the brain starts to create what's called flavor objects or aroma objects. So it's basically saying these are all these different chemicals that I'm picking up. Where have I seen them before?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
As an object. So it starts to group them and into different objects. And so there's going to be a personal thing happening there, right? So it's grouping them. And then it's passing that information through across your amygdala, and that's like your limbic system. That's your emotional system, right? So that's basically deciding, is this good or is this bad?
Oh,
should I be worried? Should I not?
Okay.
So smell is obviously not only for nice things, right? It should be for things that warn you off, or, animals have a very keen sense of smell to protect themselves, from dangers, right? So the first priority for your brain is, am I happy? Am I sad? Okay. Is this going to be good? Is this dangerous? And it's giving you this early warning system.
Okay.
And that's before you even it reaches your conscious brain, right? You're not thinking about it. You react to it, a smell very quickly.
Okay.
And then it passes through other parts of your brain that are associated with memory. It's like, okay, so where have I picked this up before? How do I identify this aromatic, right? These aromas or this aroma object. How do I identify it? So it has to pass through your memory system, right? And it passes through all these different areas of your brain. And so, what's interesting here is that the same aroma is going to be experienced by different people in different ways.
Okay.
Because it's dependent upon their previous experience. And so aromatics, which is the biggest part of flavor, is very personal.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you have taste.
Yeah.
And taste is using taste buds, which are on your tongue, but also go down your throat. And they can pick up all sorts of compounds, but a much reduced array of different compounds. And they get broadly separated into salty, sweet, sour, umami. So all of the sort of the classic, you've seen the tongue diagram, which a lot of people can test with different parts of your tongue getting, that's an old school way of mapping out the tongue. So bitterness tends to reside at the back of the tongue, etc. But that's being contested at the moment. So I'm not going to say that that's truth. But basically you have taste buds and they're picking up information. But the information that they are picking up is mostly related to nutrition. So whilst aroma is like trying to basically go, what is this? Trying to understand it. Is this dangerous? Is this safe? Should I be happy? Should I be sad? Should I feel scared, etc. Is much more sort of a direct line into your memory and your warning system. Okay. Taste is like, this is slightly sweet, therefore it must have carbohydrates in it. So this is probably nutritious for me. Okay. This is bitter. I wonder why that's bitter. It's going to have a pharmacological effect on me. Should I be worried? Which is why kids tend to be a little bit like scared of bitterness until you start to learn, no, that bitterness is a medicinal bitterness, right? And so you start to, the taste is sort of directing your attention to, is this something that's nutritious for me or not, or
that's
poisonous?
Interesting. I still really don't like bitter taste. What's the psychology behind that, or is there?
Well, so bitterness in general relates to compounds that are going to have a pharmacological effect. In other words, they are going to have a physiological effect on you, either toxic or beneficial. And a lot of the difference between beneficial and toxic is just dose. In other words, everything that has an effect on you, you can overdose on it and it can become toxic, right? And so your brain, or built into your system, is understanding that bitterness is a warning. Right? Don't have too much of this. Make sure that you sort of understand that this is potent. And so, you are going to react, depending on your memories and depending on your experience, to that warning system differently. And it might really sort of, worry you, or not worry you, but instinctively you might just veer away from it. And for some people who've had different experiences, they might engage with it. But it's also true to say that your anatomy is different. Your taste buds, the number of your taste buds is different. So you might experience bitterness much stronger than I do.
So I was actually going to ask, what is is there a grade of how good our smelling is, or tasting notes are, just like ears and eyes?
So this is okay. So let's break it down like this. You have different bits of information, right? You've got the information that comes from the actual plant, right? So that is the experience of the plant in its terroir, as we've talked about in previous videos, and built up these set of chemicals. So you've got the actual anatomy of the plant. Then you've got the anatomy of us, right? So your anatomy is different to mine. You'll have probably different numbers, or definitely different numbers of taste buds. So yes, you can say somebody who's got more taste buds maybe can taste, better than others.
Okay.
But I think that's way too simplistic, because it might be that actually too many taste buds, it's not just about the number, it's also about how those tastes are modulated. And I forgot to say that your taste buds are also modulated by your trigeminal system. So your trigeminal system is a system of nerves which are there to pick up things like sensation, like touch, like heat, right?
Yeah.
And so people think that they have no relationship with taste, but they absolutely do, which is why hot things will taste different from cold things.
Okay, yeah.
Like ice cream, when it melts, tastes too sweet, but when it's cold, it's the right sweetness, right? So you've got lots of different systems at play. It's not just the number of taste buds. You've got lots of different systems in play anatomically that are going to affect your ability to taste. And sometimes that might throw it out of balance. So maybe you taste too much bitterness and therefore you can't taste other things. So it doesn't necessarily make you a better taster if you've got more taste buds.
And can you become better with experience?
Well, that brings us on to the third part of this, which is you've got the chemicals in the plant, you've got the anatomy of your body, but you've got also your brain. And all experiences are experienced in the brain. I mean, the visual experience of seeing this studio is not actually here, it's actually in here, right? Your brain is piecing together information and creating a story, creating this visual space. And in the same way, it's creating taste. So your aroma and your taste is a creation of your brain. And so therefore, if you work on it, just like everything, you can assist your brain or train your brain to be better at it or to access bits of information quicker.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say that the priority for anybody is not to think, oh, you're a better taster than me. I mean, some people think that I'm a really good taster, but actually no, but honestly, truthfully, I don't think I've got more taste buds than I should actually get them measured. You can, but
you can.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, you have to get it measured.
No, I don't. I'm certain I don't have more taste buds than average.
Okay.
The difference is simply that I've had to do this regularly. Right.
But what about the fact that the way that you articulate it? Is that also?
So that's also a brain thing, though. It's about accessing the memory and then figuring out, how to talk about it, right? And I have definitely improved in the last 20 years. I would hope so. And I think that's, that is the whole point is, and why this video is so important, that don't think that you're a better taster or a worse taster. Just go with this practice. And it's not something to feel pressured by, and it's certainly not something to fear. And that's one of the big things. People are so scared of it. And I think that if there's one thing that you learn in this is, just say what you think. As long as it's genuine, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. This is your personal experience, right?
And what about when nothing comes to my head and I don't know what to say?
Well, that's also something that you should give space for. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So you've got aroma and you've got taste. Put them together, that equals flavour. Okay. Right, so those are the definitions. Aroma through the nose. But not just this way, which is called aroma, but you've got retronasal aroma. So basically breathing out when something's in your mouth is also going to, so you've got nasal and retronasal. Okay. So aroma, and then you've got the taste modulated by the trigeminal system. So aroma and taste put together equals flavor. So when we talk about flavor, we're actually combining those two things. And most of the time when people say, well, we're tasting notes, essentially you're talking about both, right? You're talking about aromatics and the whole thing. All right, before I know we want to get into this, so I'm just going to heat this guy one up. So some prep. If you're going to do a tasting session where you want to really sort of practice this process of tasting, then no smells around you. In other words, don't wear perfume. Don't worry. You're okay. She has in the past come to our house and I've just gone like, I can't taste because the smell of your perfume.
No, I put perfume on, by the way.
Okay, right. But
it's
basically,
not too strong.
Just try to avoid scents like, perfume. Also hand cream, because you're going to be holding things, right? Yeah. And many times I've picked up a Gaiwan after Celine has held it, and I've gone, oh, it has a really sort of rosy, flowery aroma, and then I realised that it's actually her hand cream on there. So just avoid any scents. Also, like, I know people like to have flowers around, or they like to burn incense when having tea, and that's fine and that's great. But if you're thinking about doing a pure sort of tasting session, I would advise against that, because it's just going to affect it. Also, drinking out in nature, love it. It's great. But you are also going to be impacted by the smell of the flowers and the air, etc., etc. Okay, so you want to sort of put yourself in a neutral environment. The other thing that you want to do to prep is make sure that you have the right teaware. Okay, so important, like if I had a very narrow sort of pot with only a small little hole, you're not going to get as much information.
That was the Taiwan tea, wasn't it? The like one of the things that you have that we tried.
The smelling cup. No, I was talking about the pot. If because I'm having a Gaiwan here with a big rim, so you can really get a lot of information. So basically what we're trying to do here is control the information. We don't want external information, like too many scents, and we want to make sure that we get the richest amount of information by having teaware which works, right? And Gongfu teaware is sort of designed for that. And cups as well that have like this blade shape. They're designed for giving you better information. And the third thing, obviously, that you need to do is when you're brewing tea is brew it properly. And we've done videos about that before, but Gongfu style brewing is all about trying to maximize the amount of information that you get so that you can really get a full understanding of the taste of a tea. So that's important prep work. Let's get into this tea. So I'm not going to be doing any tasting notes. In this video.
At all.
Hold my tongue. I'm just going to...
I think you should... But also I was actually going to ask, if I tasted something and then you tasted something and then you said this is what it tastes like, then I might agree with you, because I think you're the authority on this. The authority. Thanks. But I was just going to think, what if it's because I'm thinking what you said and then I'm and it happens. That it's that, but I'm not tasting it.
And so when you're doing tasting, I think it's important that you, first of all, if you're doing solo tasting, then that doesn't happen. It can happen. Once we get into it, we'll talk about that. But if you're doing tasting in groups, then you've got to sort of make a decision early on. Are you doing a formal tasting? Not formal sounds like too formal. But are you meeting up as a group to get to know a tea and tasting? In which case, I would always advise write notes separately. Do a few infusions and don't talk about it with each other. Right, and then you can start your discussion. I think that's a valuable thing to do, because otherwise you can influence somebody too much. And even if that influence is not necessarily wrong, maybe it does smell of lilacs, and I've handed the Gaiwan to you, and you've gone, oh yeah, it smells of lilacs. What it's done is taken away your ability to come up with your own note, which would have been valuable information. So it's important, I think, when you're doing it in groups, to have some time to just do it, write down some notes by yourself or individually, and then you can share. Because then obviously the conversation is what's fun. Then you can talk about it and go, oh, I didn't get that, I got this. And you can do that. Right. Okay, so we got the smell of the dry leaf. So you can just smell this. And don't worry, we're not going to talk about, you don't have to come up with it immediately. But I want to talk about the actual process here. Because smelling might seem like an obvious thing, easy to do, but there are different ways of smelling. Okay, so pick that up, and you can smell with by putting your nose sort of deep in the Gaiwan, or you can smell just by wafting the sort of Gaiwan around, and that's going to affect what you smell, because the volatile aromatics are transient, so they dissipate, right? And some are more transient than others. So some will travel further distances than others. So distance makes a difference, okay? Another thing just all I'm basically saying is experiment, play. Don't just think, oh, this is, smelling is a sort of one-dimensional action, right? It's got lots of different nuances. So that's important. It's also important the intensity and the speed that you smell. So if you put that to your nose again and breathe really slowly through your nose, there's a tendency that you'll pick up more of the deeper, richer notes of the tea. Whereas if you take very short, sharp sniffs like this, usually you tend to pick up quite intense, higher notes of the tea. So again, you know, play around with the speed at which you smell as well. So distance, speed, they do make a difference. Do you not notice any difference?
No, I just like a dog smelling. I prefer
and this
it
is
deep.
something like when you do tasting and you go to tasting rooms for anything, they all have these little quirks like slurping and stuff like that. This is one of the quirks, and I don't often do it in my videos, but you might see, you know, I do a little bit of this and then, you know, a little bit of that, and you tend to pick up different aromatics, and you'll notice that they hit different parts of your nose as well.
Okay. So on that, so going on tasting things, sometimes, you know how people, there's this whole thing about like drinking wine and like smelling it. It's like, mate, just drink the wine. Like there's a whole pretentiousness around it. I feel like I'm having this at this moment. Yeah. So how do I push past that?
I've been accused of being pretentious with my tasting notes. I think the first thing is don't care.
Okay.
I mean, pretension is something that is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like if you feel that you are being genuine, if you are enjoying the process, if you're not trying to say things to impress people, but you're actually just being truthful about how you feel about tea, then who cares if other people think you're pretentious? I mean, you know, ultimately, this is about your experience of something and your enjoyment of something. And that might be read by other people as pretentious. It might be read as too geeky. It might be, but that's other people's, you know,
problem.
It's not a problem. That's theirs. That's not mine. I don't own that, you know, opinion. That's their opinion. So ultimately, as long as you are enjoying this process and it's genuine, so you're not thinking, well, what should I say? And that's really, you know, an important part of it. And that comes from fear, you know, oh, I'm frightened. Oh, I'm just going to say something that I think sounds like I know what I'm doing. That's really like where you've got to sort of step back and go, hold on a minute, just observe that. That's not right. Yeah. If it's genuine, then it's genuine, you know? Okay, so I'm just going to rinse it. So we're going to get more information. Right, so this is all about how we maximize the amount of information that you're getting. And we're going to still focus on smell, on aroma. So we talked about distance, right? We talked about sniffs, so short versus long. You can keep trying and practice that. And you hopefully, as the steam dissipates, you'll start to notice that you get different aromatics there. But also, and this is something that I only learned a few years ago, open your mouth when you smell. It's a weird thing. You don't have to like, just a little bit. Just a little bit, just opening your lips slightly means that the aroma or the air doesn't just go through your nose, but also goes into your mouth as well. And in my experience, you tend to pick up more of the savory note of the tea. So these are all different things that you can do when you are playing with smell and aroma. And there are probably others as well. And like the temperature of the leaves makes a difference. All of these things make a difference. But physically, that's the method. So distance, focus on long, slow, and short. And try experimenting with mouth open and mouth shut and see what differences you get. Do you want to give me any aromatic notes?
I was going to say that I don't like it when I'm doing that to it, but when I'm like it's a strong, long breath in, it's definitely nice. This just reminds me of walking and Hampstead Heath in the summer.
Okay.
It brings back really good memories, and it's like I feel like the grass is yellow for some reason. That kind of, it's got that kind of vibe, that kind of memory. So I'm instantly connected to it.
Okay, so we'll dive into that memory a little bit further down the line. But what you said before was very interesting. You said, when I do short sniffs, I don't like it. when I do long sniffs, I really like it.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that I've noticed this when I do tastings, is that when you hand tea to somebody and they smell it or they drink it for the first time, their initial instinct is to judge it, right? So, that's I think a mistake, because this is not about deciding whether or not you like the tea or not like the tea. In the same way, when you taste a wine, it's not really about, do I like it or not like it? That's not your first consideration. Your first consideration is, what is the experience?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And learn the experience, see how it makes you feel, get involved in it, like get flavor notes, get tastings, even if they're unpleasant ones. There's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to write only nice tasting notes.
What is the experience, or what is the memory? Or is the memory enveloped?
Okay, what I mean by experience is like experience the tea. Okay. And by doing that, you are going to be recalling memories, some of them pleasant, some of them unpleasant. You might go, oh, that smells like something awful that, I don't know, like my grandmother's attic and it was awful. But the point here is, try not to assign judgment as to good or bad.
Okay.
That's, I think, a hindrance to the tasting process and a hindrance to any sort of learning, because you want to sort of experience it first, and then you can make a judgment as to whether or not you liked that experience or not, or you felt that experience. See, even experiences that I didn't like, even if a tea that I didn't like, I still think that the experience was valuable. Do you know what I mean?
But how can you tell the difference between a tea you don't like and a tea that's not good?
And that can change over time. So you could like something, you could hate something to begin with and like it after. I think that comes from my experience with how often you tend to pull it out of your cupboard and want to drink it.
Okay.
The judgment, and obviously I make the judgment in terms of me deciding whether or not to purchase it. And there are lots of different quality markers, and that's a whole other series if you wanted to get into that. But what I'm saying is, when you are approaching a tasting session, I don't think that your primary thought should be, do I like it or not like it? Your primary, the purpose is to experience it. And through that experience, you will have a personal relationship that develops with the tea, and an opinion will develop. But do you know what I mean? Like, if your primary thought is, and I've noticed this so many times, you hand people like a tea and their instinct is to say, oh, I really like it because. It's like, no, I'm not asking whether or not you like it. It's, what is your tasting note?
Okay, interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm also noticing that I'm closing my eyes. I'm assuming that's because I want to focus instinctively, I just want to focus on the...
Shutting down other senses helps to focus your brain onto the senses that you are using. So it's a good practice to shut your eyes. Do whatever you feel is necessary to focus your attention on the aromatic or the taste. And one thing I forgot to say is, sometimes your nose can get overfilled and you can have too much information going on. A great way to reset is to smell this part of yourself. It's interesting, but that part of your body, unless you've sprayed perfume on it. You haven't.
No, I haven't. It's just because this is freshly washed, so I can smell the detergent.
It's a strange thing, but it tends to work, I find. Just smelling this part of your elbow helps to reset it. A lot of people think of coffee, but coffee is too strong an aroma. If you go to a perfume shop, they tend to have little...
Coffee?
Coffee beans.
Oh.
It's very sort of harsh, and it sort of resets everything.
Okay.
It doesn't reset it, it just stops you from smelling anything else. Yeah. But I think that's a better way. Okay, so we've done a smell, our aroma, and we can continue to obviously pick up information. This was the rinse, so I'm just going to give that to the cat. And now we're going to do our brew, and you can do your tasting. And then we're going to start talking about tasting notes, okay? And what I think is important to sort of separate in your head is what I call conscious tasting notes or structured tasting notes versus unconscious tasting notes, right?
What's unconscious? So
unconscious, bear in mind that all of the information is passing by your unconscious limbic system, right? Your emotional system, right? And is then going to your memory, right? What I think is a very valuable process is free association. Don't try to come up with tasting notes. Just let images, let thoughts, let memories, let emotions hit you and say them or write them. And when you are tasting in a group, I think that should be something that you almost set out at the beginning as a rule. We are going to be doing free association first. And the free association doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be wrong. In fact, there's no right or wrong, but it could be something that you say and then you say, oh, actually, it's totally wrong. It doesn't matter. The point is to free the mind, free it to just make associations, because that is where I find the most personal and best tasting notes come from. And then after that, you can go through more conscious or structured tasting notes. And something that I would say is more structured would be using those flavor wheels. I've got one here in front of you, right? Okay. A lot of people, and you've seen these flavor wheels for wine and for coffee and for lots of things. And a lot of people like to use these flavor wheels because it's great. You can say, oh, well, it's fruity, and go, okay, well, it's fruity. What kind of fruit? And you can move out and you can start to sort of pick up tasting notes. Obviously, the problem with that is you're defined by that, right? And it sort of leads all of your attention away from potentially more personal, more direct, and maybe even more authentic tasting notes. All right. So I advise everybody to not focus on the flavor charts and not focus on that sort of structured tasting, and try to think, is it fruit? Is it, just the initial tasting should be about letting your mind be free, right? And that's where the beauty of the mindlessness or mindfulness, because they're pretty much the same thing, of tea comes. Is I like, and I don't do this often when I'm shooting a video because I always obviously have the pressure, but I like when I taste the tea for the first time to try not to think about tasting notes. Don't just let your mind be free for the free association to happen. So you talked about memories, which I think is a great thing, because you talked about an emotional state, right? You talked about, you in Hampstead Heath with yellow grass, feeling happy. What's the season?
It's late summer.
Late summer. You with people?
Yes, and summer dresses.
Summer dresses.
Could feel the grass on walking on the grass.
Yeah.
It's a lovely memory.
And can you recall anything in that environment that you smelt, or is it just a combination of the whole?
Yeah, it's a combination of that and just the feeling of just like being like content.
Okay, so we're sort of talking about an emotion here, contentment, and then you're talking about an environment. And so it would be interesting to find out whether or not the taste of this tea actually has markers that are related to that environment, or it's simply that the taste or the feel of this tea gives you a sense of contentment. Here you go. Have a taste. So now we're going to talk about the physical action of tasting. We talked about aroma in terms of distance and in terms of sniffs. With tasting, what you want to do to get the most amount of information is don't drink too hot.
It's hot.
Okay, which is why we have gong fu cups to try to dissipate the heat quickly, right? So that's important. Yeah.
Randomly, just as I drank that, I just thought of Ayana.
Okay.
I've got that probably drinking it too hot with Ayana.
Yeah, exactly.
Too hot to Ayana.
The pain. You've seen my daughter going too hot, blow. So drinking at the right temperature, and as it cools, the temperature, the taste is going to change. As we said before, the trigeminal system is attached or modulates the tasting, so you are going to be tasting differently. And also, as it cools, you're going to get different sets of aromatics being released. So taste at different temperatures, but don't taste too hot where you're actually suppressing that. Right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is try to put the tea around your mouth. So don't just sip and swallow, but try to let it move around your mouth. And you can do that just by sort of agitating your tongue slightly, just sort of moving your tongue a little bit around, just to sort of let the tea hit all areas of your mouth and the roof of your mouth, right? Also important that you breathe out through the nose. Oh. Because remember we're talking about that retronasal aroma. It's really important that all of the aromatics that are sort of vaporizing in your mouth go through that olfactory system, so you pick up the aroma as well. So tasting, you can do some slurping. Some people like to slurp, and the purpose of slurping is to sort of atomize the tea and make the vapor go everywhere, like little droplets of tea go everywhere. The problem with that is it can go up your nose, and then
Thanks for that warning.
then you get like a damp nose and you can't smell anything, or it dampens the ability to smell. So I sort of advise against it. I prefer to just sort of agitate and move the tea around, breathe out through the nose. All right, so let's go. let's talk about, any free association. You don't have to think about right, wrong.
So first of all, it was honey and it was sweet.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that's also because I know what the name is.
Possibly.
And then afterwards, it was a bit more acidic, the second try.
Okay.
And then the third time, it got back to being quite honey, creamy. Yeah.
Okay. And so let's dive into one of those. Honey, creamy. Like, can you associate that to anything in your memory, like a food or a dessert? And you can also use non-food tasting notes. So don't be frightened of saying it reminds me of asphalt. Tarmac, or it reminds me of, a lot of people that sort of go, oh, you shouldn't use those because it puts people off. But I think they're accurate as well. So, you don't have to worry about not using food.
I think for me, again, it's more memory, but the honey reminded me of my mum because she really loves like the best quality honey. So that reminded me of that. And also just the sweetness, just like, it's like a nice like wave to the tongue. That's what it felt like.
And you've now brought up something which is another point about tasting, is that taste, unlike smell you get the information and that's it. It's been processed, and obviously when you smell again, you get more information. But with taste, it's shifting. Taste is shifting because as you swallow, and saliva enters your mouth, it's moving stuff around, it's changing the dilution, and so the taste moves and changes. And so you've got to think of taste as more of a temporal thing. So at the beginning, it might taste, I don't know, a bit more dusty, and then it moves to honey, and then So that's a good point. So yes, you were talking about memories, honeys from your mum.
Yeah, and just the feeling like the amazing feeling you get from something sweet, and you get that on your tongue especially.
Yeah.
And it's like, and like I said, it was just like a nice wave to the tongue, and you're just like.
Okay, so we've got so far Hampstead Heath. Yeah. Right. Would you say that there's any of that grass aroma in this, or would you say that you've got any of that heath forest taste or aroma in this? It's okay to say no.
At this point.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
No, it's just I get some like very like grass that's this long, that's yellow, that's been like had the summer sun whole evening, the whole summer. Okay, that's what I get. So maybe let me see if I. Wait, what was your question? Sorry.
No, I was just asking you to describe deeper the scene and whether or not you feel like you're picking it up in the taste or the aroma. And what about this honey? Is it particular type of honey? Is it like a flower honey? Do you know anything about the honey that your mum used to
What is it she keeps talking
love?
To me about? That she like the best quality. I don't know. Clearly, listen very well to her. It's like honey. Manuka honey. Right, Manuka honey from New Zealand.
Yeah, okay.
The
so
most
she's talking about
expensive one from Waitrose.
But a lot of times, honey sort of has because obviously it comes from flowers. Sometimes you can sort of pick up a floral sort of aroma in the honey. So when people talk about honey, sometimes they're actually sort of referring to the sweetness of a flower. Again, you can free associate, but and then you were talking about acidity. Or a sort of
the second time that I drank it became more acidic.
Okay, so the acidity.
But it became more acidic.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was like, it became more acidity.
It became more acidity. Yeah, well, there are, we can talk about why that is, but that's not really the purpose of this video. So let's talk about what kind of acidity does it relate to? Would you say it relates to, I don't know, a citrus fruit acidity, or does it relate to like a tang, like a grapefruit tang, but without the sourness? Do you know what I mean? Yes, is it like the skin, or is it actually sour on the tongue? And taste some more. So you can sort of, and this is the point. So what I would recommend is try to do free association as much as possible. And then when you have discussions, you can sort of try to dial it in a little bit more and see how those free associations may apply to the tea.
Yeah, it's hot. I drank it too hot again.
It is too hot. You need to let it cool. But I'm picking up a little bit of acidity on the back of the tongue as well.
But how do you know it's because I've told you that?
First of all, does it matter?
Yeah, it's true.
a lot of people say that to me, well, I just taste this because I heard it. Well, your brain is tasting it, right? As I said, your brain is experiencing it. So it's still a genuine taste.
Yeah. But what if it's not the brain hearing the sound of it and then associating?
It's still, all aroma and taste is created in the brain, right? So all of the information that you get is going to impact the brain creating flavor compounds. So look, I'm not saying that, that's why I'm saying you should not listen to others, try to get your own tasting notes. But inevitably, what you say is going to influence me. What I say is going to influence you. We should celebrate that, accept that. We shouldn't try to necessarily control it once we've done our initial tasting notes. But I think it is useful to do your initial tasting notes. Just so that you can come to the party with something that is personal to you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so anything else?
It was creamier before, now it's less creamy.
Yeah, I would agree. As the water sucks out a bit more of the inner leaf material, it has a bit more oomph to it, a bit more bite.
Yeah.
Breathe out through the nose. Anything you notice, any other associations? It's difficult when the camera's in front of you, and it would be much easier if you were by yourself, but try to let yourself just, let your mind just come up with ideas.
But also now that I've had it again, it reached the top of my mouth, and that is a different experience. Yeah. It feels like a more bitter experience at the top of my mouth.
At the top of your palate. Okay. So,
but maybe it's bitter because it's stronger.
It is definitely stronger.
Okay.
It's definitely stronger.
Because it's stronger, I'm sensing bitter. Is that normal?
Yeah, that's normal. It's being extracted stronger, for sure. For sure. This is quite a quite a hard infusion.
Yeah.
But again, try not to decide whether or not you like it or dislike it. Just go, okay, interesting, more information.
Yeah.
So what kind of bitterness are you getting?
What kinds are there?
There's bitterness that's like pharmaceutical bitterness that really stays, like aspirin or paracetamol. There's bitterness like a sort of bittersweet, thing that you get from like certain herbs. There's sort of pithy bitterness, like if you bite like a grapefruit and you get the bit of the white, you get that sort of fruity bitterness that sort of, some people like, some people dislike. So much of creating tasting notes is just sort of actually not happening when you are drinking tea. It's happening outside when you are tasting things. You sort of maybe take some time to record that information a little bit more diligently. And that's one of the great things about drinking tea is actually, even when you're not drinking tea, because you are involved in trying to come up with tasting notes, you tend to be more present when you are smelling or tasting other things.
Okay.
Here you go.
Thank you. Oh, it doesn't remind me of summer anymore.
Okay. Shifting.
It reminds me of the streets now.
Right, streets. What about the streets?
The more, I don't know, it just reminds me of a weird specific point in my street.
On your journey
home. On my journey, yeah, exactly.
Oh, really?
It's like going through past a garage straight to something else.
Okay,
it's a bit
so
like heavier. It's more concretey.
Concrete, yeah. And is it wet or dry?
It's like there has been rain beforehand,
right? But
it's kind of settled.
Okay.
Yeah.
So slightly sort of damp concrete.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And it'd be interesting when you walk past that point again. Yeah. Look around, see if there's anything else that you might associate with this tea afterwards.
And but around that area, there's gardens with really nice flowers as well. So maybe I must be picking that up as well.
Possibly. Okay.
But definitely, I get like wet. Now I'm getting more wet leaves.
Wet leaves, wet wood.
Yes.
A bit more. That Hampstead Heath has now moved into sort of autumn.
Yes, exactly.
A bit more, rainy.
Yeah.
Okay. The wood is still wet. Are you getting varnish, or is it just wet bark? What kind of?
Definitely wet bark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And this tang or sourness, can we dive a bit further into that? Anything that, is there any sort of fruits that pop into your mind? Relating to that tang.
There's that lasting tang. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it
right
doesn't.
at the end,
Yeah. It's like a little animal flushing its tail and be like, I'm out.
I'm here, I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it feels like. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Okay. So just allowing time for this. And that's why I think whenever I do workshops and tastings, or whenever I get people in front of the camera to do tastings, it's not the best environment to do tastings. The best environment is a relaxed environment, an environment where you are sort of by yourself or with people that you don't feel you need to necessarily be, filling in the gaps of the silence, and just allowing yourself time to free associate. But I mean, if you look at the tasting notes that you've already written for this, you could say things like, early infusions, have a late summer, tall grass, and, honey.
Yeah.
As you move through the infusions, it gives up more mineral concrete notes and wet woods. You've written tasting notes, and that was just sort of the very beginnings of you sort of finding, these things. But it's about trust. It's about saying, look, I'm picking up this imagery. Don't be afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to write it down. Don't be afraid to change your mind afterwards, right? And trust in that sense. Trust that unconscious brain's giving you that information, because it is processing information and it is providing you that information. Now, sometimes you can go a bit wild and taste it again and go, what was I thinking? But it's better to go out and dial in rather than the other way around. And that's why in my videos, you see me sometimes sort of, going out a little bit and just sort of coming up with lots of tasting notes. But most of the time I have to say, and this is, I think, the difference as you start to become more trained in tasting, is most of those tasting notes actually, after you taste them again, go, actually, that's actually pretty accurate, right? So it's not about there's no difference in sort of how wild you are in terms of the free association, just saying things. Actually, it's just more of them stick, Okay. So do you have any questions about that? Any questions about tasting? I think you've done, you've come up with some nice tasting notes around Honey Duchess.
Do I stop smelling? Do I continue smelling this?
Keep smelling this.
Oh, and this as well.
Yeah, be getting all the information that you can. That's another thing that you should be constantly doing. Sticking your nose in the leaves, and it will contribute to it.
It keeps reminding me of Ayana as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wonder whether that's also, it's reminding me that because we've drank it together.
But does it remind you of her sort of
there's
smell?
a warmth of her that reminds me.
Yeah,
this one.
She's clearly been drinking a lot of tea. She's exuding the tea smell.
She's been giving me a masterclass.
My daughter smells like an empty gong dab. One of the best compliments you could possibly give to a tea head father. So yeah, that's the process. And I hope that this has helped some people out there. I know that a lot of people find it difficult, but please try to take away that fear. I also think a useful, and I talk about it a lot during my videos, but I also think a useful thing to consider is the balance of the flavors. So once you've started to sort of pick out flavor notes, do this free association, write stuff down, then discuss it, then have this discussion talking about the memories, talking about what it is, and then move to the flavor wheel. So then you can go, well, let's actually now take something that's a bit more structured and see if there's any notes that we can suddenly find that, we didn't free associate. That would be my process. And then I would start talking about the balance of the tea, right? Because the balance of the tea is also, I would say, part of the tasting note, right? Like, it might be that it has, and I like to associate this to music, as you know, and just imagine like a beautiful sort of piece of music or whatever track it is. You want to have all of the frequencies in there. You want a balance. You don't want it to be too bassy. You don't want it to be too high toppy. You want there to be a good balance. And sometimes you'll taste a tea that has really nice tasting notes, but when you look at the overall picture, you say, oh, there's a hole there. There's something missing. It doesn't have a structure. It doesn't have a middle point in it, right? And so that's another part of the tasting note, I would say. So coming up with the tasting notes, coming up with the actual sort of imagery, and then working out whether or not it has a good balance and has a good journey in the mouth is important. But try to use those tips. Let me know if you've got your own tips yourself. I'm sure that there's plenty of you out there who've got your own ideas about how to do tasting. That's my approach. Trust in yourself. Allow the unconscious mind to come up with tasting notes. Try not to think it through too much, and certainly don't be scared. Any other questions or anything that you want to say, Holter?
No.
What do you think of this tea then?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, so then that's afterwards, right? After you've come up with the tasting notes, you can find out my tasting notes. I'll stick a link in the description below to this product and also to the video where I do the tasting, so you can see how I tasted this tea. That's it. Final episode.
Yeah, I've learned so much, and thank you guys for joining us on this wonderful journey.
Yeah, I hope that you're going to be continuing your tea journey. I'll be checking in on her. Don't worry. I'll keep you updated.
I'm backed by popular demand or not.
Yeah, enough likes, and I'm sure we'll get her back. All right, that's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you are in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, this is Holter, and I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the good stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea.
Bye.